Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the fourth week of a Sparkling Box 2.0. It's the last week. We're going to wrap it up with champagne, actual champagne. Non-vintage Duval-Leroy or Maison Duval-Leroy champagne. Brut Reserve is what we're tasting today. It's like a very regal black label. You might have seen this label. I mean, Duval-Leroy, you can find it a lot of places. They're pretty widely distributed. But I actually don't have any announcements really. Next week, next Tuesday is a pickup day. For all you wine captains, the wines will be ready for pickup after tomorrow. So anytime starting in the afternoon tomorrow till anytime before Tuesday, you can go and pick up your wines. By the way, we're going to do that at Zacky's again this time, as opposed to at Ian's office. So obviously, I will reach out to you separately, but just know that the pickup is happening at Zacky's, and then you can do that anytime after tomorrow. Besides that, don't really have anything else. Besides, we are donating to Action Against Hunger this month. As you all know, we donate 1% of gross revenue, 1% of gross revenue to an organization each month. And this month we are donating to Action Against Hunger. If you want to donate alongside 6 Foot Wine Club or learn more about what we do, what they do, you can check it out right in the chat box. But besides that, that's it. So let's just roll into the wine. I mean, champagne. I want to drink some champagne. So here we are. If you're just joining us now, this is what we're drinking: non-vintage NV Duval-Leroy Champagne Brut Reserve is what we're tasting today. I realized this has been the sparkling month, but I haven't demonstrated any of this all month. So I figure I should do this now. Better late than never, right? I assume most of you are very comfortable with opening the cage by this point. But in case some of you are still a little afraid or a little hesitant to open the bottle, I just want to demonstrate. So that way you know how to open a sparkling wine safely. I mean, obviously, Petnet and that Car Fondo we had, which was just a cork that was in the bottle. Obviously, you don't have to worry about that. But as a general rule of thumb, or as a general advice for Petnets, I usually open it pretty slowly. Some Petnets can be quite disturbed or quite lively inside. So some of them are not disgorged. So some of them can quite explode quite aggressively. So be careful with that. But besides, we got it right here. All right. So anytime you get a sparkling wine with a cage on top, this is what you do. There's usually a tab right here. If you look, this one has a tab as well. You don't have to use a tab. Usually I like to just cut this with a foil cutter on a wine opener, because they always break. This one is not too bad. It doesn't have that little plastic tab that goes around. This is actually perforated foil that went all the way around, so that was pretty easy to take off. But usually, yeah, I cut it underneath the cage level, just go all the way around, just like you're cutting regular wine foil, and then just cut it and take it off. So now you have this, right? You have cork that is put in place by this cage that's around there. They all have this little knob right here, the circular thing. So this is what you do. Pull this down, right? It's kind of perpendicular now. And then you put either your whole thumb on it, whole palm on it, or thumb on it, or 2 fingers, whatever you feel comfortable. I usually just do it with my thumb. The point is, there's a lot of pressure in this bottle. There's about twice as much air pressure inside this bottle as there is in car tire. We just talked about Marty the Godfather. In fact, we did open up a bottle of champagne when we visited him, and he was telling us about how he's personally seen 3 people get hit in the eye and actually go blind during his career. So this is no joke. This shit really does happen. So be careful. So yeah, once this cage comes off, this is essentially a pneumatic weapon that you have in your hand. So that's why always keep a hand or a thumb, something on it, so it doesn't just pop off accidentally on you. So, all right, usually you put a thumb. And then this is always, it doesn't matter with this Cava, champagne, I don't know where this convention comes from, but it's always 5.5 turns. So by sixth turn, it basically comes loose. So here you go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? And now it's loose. At this point, this is a pneumatic weapon, like I said. Do not ever let go of this thumb or anything. So usually what I do at this point is a lot of people, I see this all the time. A lot of people set the bottle down at this point, and then they try to take this cage off. I don't worry about that. I just basically grab the whole thing using the cage as actually something that gives me a little bit of grip and a friction around the cork. And then what I do is instead of holding the cork up top, I twist the bottom. I just hold the top in place, and then I just twist the bottom of the bottle. And then you move it back and forth, back and forth. You're going to feel it go. And at some point, you're going to hear the sound. Voila. And that's what you have. That's how you safely open a bottle. You heard that little sound. That should have been a little bit quieter. If I was in a restaurant setting, other Psalms, other people on the floor would have talked some shit. It'd be like, dude, I heard you fart for that bottle. We call it nun's fart, that little hissing sound that the bottle makes. The softer that sound, the better the opening is in the restaurant. But, you know, when you're at a party or you're at home, who cares? Make the noise, pop that shit open, who cares? But just be careful. All right, so that's how you open it. Just like everything else in life, practice makes perfect. So if you're not uncomfortable, if you're still uncomfortable, just practice, you know, and then you'll get it. All right, here we go. First and foremost, cheers, y'all. Happy post-Thanksgiving. Happy Champagne Week. Happy to be drinking champagne with y'all. Delicious. All right, let's start with the map because that's what we always do. So where are we? Champagne comes from France, in case you didn't know that, in case you haven't seen all those crazy Instagram memes that's been going around. But only champagne, real champagne, comes from Champagne region of France. Everything else is a sparkling wine. We all kind of colloquially call all sparkling wine champagne here in this country. But technically, legally speaking, only place that can put the name champagne, use the name champagne on the label is actually the wines that come from Champagne. Also, this is kind of a bullshit, but there's a parts of sparkling of Russia that have actually has a legal exception to use the word champagne. So, you know, let Russians have their own thing. But in general, when we're talking about champagne, we're talking about sparkling wine that comes from Champagne. But then we'll talk about what that means in terms of what you can expect in terms of style, production method, and all of that. So as you can see on the map, it is Paris is right here. And this is about 90 miles east of Paris. And as you can see on the map, it is the most northerly wine producing region, wine producing appellation in all of Champagne, right? As you can see on the map, but this is pretty far up. So what does that mean? It means it's cold as shit here. The climate here is really, really marginal. But because it gets so far up north, it's actually pretty close to the Atlantic Ocean as well. There's some the Atlantic Ocean influence that comes in from the north coming in, brings in all the wind and the rain. And then this is where the climate, the continental climate from being in the center, right? Like we talked about Loire, all the eastern part of Loire being really continental, all that coming up. So this is where the confluence of the Atlantic Ocean influence as well as the continental influence both exist here. They say, you know, continental influence is really actually moderated by this Atlantic influence, meaning all that really hot summer, really cold winter gets moderated by the ocean influence. But the truth is the Atlantic influence just gets moderated by the continental influence as well. All that wind, all that rain that comes in, it would be much worse if there had been no continental kind of heat and then high pressure system that comes in from the center and goes up. So not, as you can imagine, not exactly a great viticulture area in terms of growing grapes, right? Like, in fact, every year it gets so cold here, the frost and hail destroy about 5% of its vineyards every year without any failure. So it's a pretty marginal place. Um, and to navigate these kind of challenges of each year, what Champagne came up with, and this is really, there's no other region in not only in France, but all in the world that have really made this concept or this style of non-vintage, meaning blending across different years, different vintages, as significant as they did here in Champagne. And all of that was just kind of really the way to deal with their economic challenges, right? Each year, one year, it would be so cold that they would lose their, more than half of their vintage. And then one year they'd be really doing really well and they would make a ton of wine. So there's really just huge fluctuation. And in order to kind of buffer or hedge against that risk, what they did was they held back a lot of the wines when there's a huge, big harvest year, and then they'll blend it in the years when the harvest was low, the yield was low. So that idea of blending across vintages and using that as like the base and then kind of the backbone of the whole entire trade of the region was no one has made it as significant as Champagne. And really the person who really made that the big thing or made a push for it and it made it the kind of mainstay of a Champagne trade structure is no one other than Madame Clicquot, Veuve Clicquot. So you might have seen that yellow bottle everywhere. I call it the Stella of Champagne world. Like it never disappoints. It's not the greatest. Their upper end stuff is fantastic. They make incredible champagne, but the yellow label that everybody we see in grocery store and everywhere, that's kind of like a Stella of Champagne essentially. It's never disappointing, but it's never like mind blowing either. Let's see. Also, when we're talking about champagne, I mean, we're talking about the wine that has probably been best branded ever in history of wine. What I mean by that is that, I mean, even in this country, just think about it. Like when we think of champagne, we think about celebratory, we think about special occasions, right? You pop open champagne on somebody's birthday, anniversary, or any occasion to celebrate. On top of that, you see it as a very luxurious item. It's marketed that way. So no one else in the world has been able to kind of command that premium price for their wine as well as champagne has. Just give you an idea of how well they've done. They produce about 300 million bottles of sparkling wine here in Champagne every year. But if they bring in that $300 million brings in 20% of France's entire wine revenue. Out of all the wine revenue that the entire country of France generates, it is all done by Champagne. The 20% of that is done by Champagne, but it only accounts for 4% of the entire wine production in all of Champagne. So imagine that 4% of the wine accounting for 20% of the money that the country of France makes, just to give you an idea of how Champagne has done so well in terms of branding. Interesting fact, there are just around 36,000 landowners here as of 2021 data that I saw within Champagne appellation. So this whole purple area. By the way, I'll give you another closer look. So when the purple area, when you look further in, this is kind of how it breaks down the Montagne Reims, the mountain of Reims. The Reims is exactly kind of like the epicenter of Champagne production. This is the kind of the big city in all of Champagne. So yeah, this is what we're talking about. And then there's Marne Valley, Côte de Blanc, White Hill. The chalk content here is so high that you can actually, when you see it from the far, like the hillside just looks white, and hence the name Côte de Blanc, the hill, White Hill. Côte de Sézanne, and then further down here we have Côte de Bar or Aube, and this is basically butting up against Burgundy, basically butting up against Chablis. So the soil type here is much closer to Chablis, a lot more like a marine shells. There's a lot of still limestone, but the kind of chalk and limestone that the Champagne is really known for starts to change once you get down to Côte d'Ivoire and Oud. There's a lot more clay in the content, soil content as well. And clay, because there's a water retention property, it does really, it gives wines a lot of this like a fruit forward character. It creates a lot more robustness in flavors, as opposed to just pure limestone. And chalk gives a lot more high acid, more precise, less fruit, acid-driven kind of wine, which is a great thing for sparkling wine. And that's kind of why this area is known for the wine, the sparkling wine that they produce. So yeah, out of all these, also funny story about Côte d'Ivoire or Oud. So even geographically speaking, here, let's see if I can go back to this. So we're talking about this. This is Oud, right? So as you can see, we're getting into Burgundy, right? That's Chablis right there, that magenta pink area. And then this is Oud. And then this is the rest of Champagne. As you can see, even geographically, how far removed it is from the rest of Champagne, and it's much closer to Burgundy. And even profile-wise, it's closer to soil profile-wise, it's closer to Burgundy than it is to Champagne. But over the years, so people in Champagne, they try to actually cut off Oud and then cut them out and then given them to Burgundy, or they can create their own appellation. They say they're not part of Champagne. Their style is very different. And then there was an actual riot that happened in Oud because they were so pissed off that they were excluded out of the, or people were trying to exclude them out of Champagne. So as a history may dictate, there's a lot of kind of a cool, different natural wine, counter establishment, cool stuff, Champagne coming out of this area than anywhere else. As you can imagine, Champagne is a very kind of regal, stuck in its tradition and very kind of a rigid place. But even within that, there's a little sub-region that's really kind of rebellious and then trying to do their own thing because, they try to exclude them. But they fought their way back, and then Côte d'Ivoire and Oud, they're included part of Champagne. So there are about 36,000 landowners in all of this, so including all these subregions. But about 56% of them, of the 36,000 landowners, they own less than 1 hectare of vineyards. So we're talking about very fractured land ownership structure that happens here. And why does that matter? And once you understand that, it kind of makes sense why, quote unquote, big houses dominate the trade scene here. Duval-Leroy is definitely, it's not the biggest, but it's up there as one of the big houses. Typically, I normally would not feature a producer this big, particularly in Champagne, because I want to kind of support grower champagnes and smaller guys, but I'll get into that later when we talk about the producer, but there's a reason why I chose them. And besides it, we got an incredible deal on this thing. So anyways, but they're one of the bigger ones. So these big houses, they essentially go out and buy up all the grapes from these small guys, or they outright either master lease or buy out the land from these little guys. So they have a huge power in terms of dictating prices and deciding who sells what grapes to who and all of that. And not only is that unfair to maybe the little guys, or is it powerless? There's the power dynamics much more favored towards the big houses than the little guys. I mean, that's true anywhere, but particularly in Champagne, the little guys really don't stand a lot of chance against the huge buying power of these big houses, because they're literally buying up all the grapes that are in the area. Not only that, because of these big houses have their own kind of quote unquote house style, which is the most sold kind of base Champagne that they sell, the stylistically, there's not many kind of innovations and different styles are coming out of champagne. They kind of stick to their house style, and they're just trying to make that, as opposed to these little producers and smaller producers producing their own little vineyard in, let's say, Côte de Sézanne or Marne Valley or Côte de Bar, and then making a very unique style, really giving something with a sense of place. So in general, in large, the majority of champagne style is very much driven by the actual big house style. However, lately, and when I say lately, I mean like last probably 15, 20 years or so, there's a huge push towards grower champagne. So you might have heard the term grower champagne. So instead of these big house champagnes, there are champagnes that are made by some of these smaller guys who own their land and they farm, and then they make their own wines instead of selling their grapes to these big houses. And these champagnes are called grower champagne, because a lot of these big houses, they don't grow, they don't have enough land holding to make all the wines. They don't grow enough grapes to make all the wines that they need. So that's why they end up buying everything. So the idea of somebody who farms their own grapes and makes their own champagne is a pretty rare idea in all of Champagne. But there are these smaller guys who are starting to do it or have been doing it. And then there's a huge kind of a trade, like as a wine industry as a whole, there's a lot more growth in popularity of this grower champagne. So I highly recommend that you guys go check that out, not just stick with these big house names, even though I am featuring big house brand today. But I advise you and then urge you to go out there and check out these grower champagnes before. And all the champagnes that we feature on this club before are all grower champagnes, so they're small guys. And quite frankly, some of those grower champagnes are actually, if not just as expensive, or surpass the pricing level of the big houses too. They've had this kind of cult following, and they've kind of become their own monster of their own as well. But yeah, that's kind of what we're talking about. But anyways, of all of that, where we are today is here. Côte de Blanc is where we are. This is where Duval-Leroy, the winery and the house mansion is essentially estate is located. As I mentioned, this is where the name comes from the fact that there's huge chalk content in the soil. So the hill looks kind of white from far. Hence the name Côte de Blanc, white hill, or hill of the white. And then this is really, they're really known for their Chardonnay. Chardonnay does really well on a super limestone and then chalk rich soil. So most of the production here is Chardonnay, but then as you go more south, you're starting to see a lot more Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, some of the darker varieties around. When you get to Auge or Côte de Bar down here, we're definitely talking about a lot of Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier as well. When we're talking about Champagne, we're basically talking about three grapes. We're talking about Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier. Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier, there's more Pinot Noir grown than any other grapes in Champagne, but they're all kind of very similar. They're all about holding about 30%, 32% of the whole entire kind of grape production here. So they're pretty equal to each other, but there's more Pinot Noir grown than there's Chardonnay. But we're talking about one white grape Chardonnay and two black grapes, Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier. There are some other minor varieties that are allowed here, like Arbonne. These are all indigenous varieties. Arbonne, Fromentou, Petit Meslier, Pinot Blanc, which is a Germanic grape. Those are also allowed, but they play a very minority role. And again, earlier I said there's a lot of kind of a counter-establishment, kind of rebellious attitude, and people doing some cool different stuff down in Côte d'Ivoire area, right? So there's a lot of these young champagne producers that are actually staying away from Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, and making champagne out of just these minority players. So things like that are popping up, or just a completely varietal Pinot Blanc champagne or Petit Meslier champagnes, even Pinot Meunier, which is rarely ever see as a varietal champagne. You might have seen this term Blanc de Blanc. That means white of the white. So that means 100% of the grape used for that wine is Chardonnay, because Chardonnay is the only white grape that's allowed. And then if you see Blanc de Noir, That means the grapes used for the champagne are either Pinot Noir or Pinot Meunier, or mostly. Majority of it is the black grapes, and then the rest of it is white. And you may be wondering, why is it the champagne if the color is white, even though the majority of the grapes that went in there is red or black grapes? Is because as soon as the grapes come in and then you press it and separate it off the skins, there's actually rarely any color on the juice itself. All the colors that we see in red wine is usually because they ferment it on the skins. So there's a maceration. The skins get macerated inside the juice. It seeps and then it extracts all the color, pigmentation, and all of that. And that's how you get the color. So if you separate out the skins as soon as it comes into the cellar, usually you don't get any color. So that's why, even though the wines that are made from black grapes are usually white. Just want to show you this actually. So this is a échelle de cru classification map. So you might have seen Grand Cru, Premier Cru, all that stuff written on a champagne label, just like you see in Burgundy. This classification kind of lasted for almost 100 years. This was created in the 18th century. Kind of formalized the price of grapes for négociants at the time, which are basically these kind of big houses. Négociant means these are people who buy grapes to make wine. They don't grow or they may grow their wines and they supplement by purchasing others, or they may just purchase without growing grapes at all. But those folks are called négociants. So in 18th century, they developed this kind of a cru classification to kind of help fix or formalize a pricing structure widely varied. So the idea is that grapes from Grand Cru sites, these red delineated lines here, right? Rain is up here, so you can kind of get an idea where it is. Marne Valley that we saw earlier has the largest number of Grand Cru sites in all of it. But so the idea is that these Grand Cru sites got 100% of the price after the authorities have dictated a vintage price per pound or per kilo. Premier Cru was 90 to 99%. So those are these non-colored places with just names written on it. Those are all Premier Crus. And then finally, basically all the other places that don't have names, they earned about 80 to 89% of the price that was dictated by the authorities. As you can imagine, there's a lot of corruption that also happened. This kind of price fixing structure, like who gets included in the Grand Cru, who gets included in the Premier Cru. There's a lot of fight, there's corruption, bribing, all that stuff happened. So the Champenois put an end to this fixed pricing structure in 1990. And then the négociants began working directly with the growers to set their own pricing, kind of a much more free market structure. Over time, it became very clear that this kind of original system of fixing prices was completely obsolete. So in 2010, this whole échelle de cru classification system was completely abolished. So these days, when you see Grand Cru, Premier Cru, all that on the label, yes, it designates that it has come from historically what was a Grand Cru site and what was a Premier Cru site. And, you be the judge whether that makes it more superior or not. Obviously, there's a huge difference between one Grand Cru site to another Grand Cru site and all of that. But in terms of pricing goes, it has absolutely no meaning. So Grand Cru does not necessarily mean it's more expensive than Premier Cru. Premier Cru does not mean it's more expensive than non-classified vineyard sites. It's just all free market now. So whatever people deem as what they want, they can negotiate directly with the growers now. So just want to give you that Grand Cru, Premier Cru is not as I don't know, revered and followed as it is in Burgundy and Champagne. However, you will see that Grand Cru, Premier Cru labels that come out on Champagne labels. What else should I tell you about Champagne? Dosage level. We've talking about dosage. So we've talked about how to make champagne. By the way, if you are unclear on what method champagne wise, we went over this last week. It's the same method that Cava was made. Um, if you are unclear or if you like a little refresh on that, let me know, and I'm more than happy to go over it. But just in the interest of saving time, and if I have more time, I'll be more than happy to go over that later. But the champagne actually does have the dosage, which is after the champagne gets disgorged, the adjustment of sugar. Champagne actually does have a very strict sugar level, which is all lab analyzed for each sugar level. So I'm putting that in the chat box. So extra brut means no dosage, means there's no sugar added whatsoever. Brut, which is 95% of champagne that's produced. This one that we're tasting today is a brut. There's up to 12 grams per liter of dosage added. So there's about 1 to 3 grams per liter of sugar that's left over after second fermentation. So even extra brut, even though there's no dosage, there's usually about somewhere between 1 and 3 grams of liter. So there's a kind of this error, the room of error, about 3 grams, give or take. So 12 grams per liter is essentially um, uh, uh, essentially what we're talking about is 12 grams, 15 grams of liter of total residual sugar, but 12 grams per liter in terms of dosage, actual dosage level added. Extra sec, demi-sec, Doux, these are all different sweetness levels. Doux is a very much fallen out of fashion. Up until about 1960s, Doux was actually majority of the champagne that was sold in the world. We're talking about 47 grams per liter. We're talking about very sweet level, sweet champagne, and that was the most popular. And that was when you basically bought a bottle of champagne from a store, that is essentially what you've gotten prior to 1960s. But these days, that has really kind of fallen out of style. Nobody really makes it. So if you have to ever come across Doux champagne, it may be worth getting it just for some, history. It's a piece of history, essentially. Aging requirement for non-vintage champagne, the minimum is 15 months. So we talked about how long the wine has to sit on the lees in champagne. Anything that's labeled, anything that has champagne written on it, at minimum, it has to age on the lees for 15 months. And then vintage champagnes, which is they're only declared on in very certain exceptional years, where the 80% of the wine that goes into the wine has to come from that particular vintage that is declaring. And you may be wondering, why not 100%? By law, you have to set aside 20% of each vintage as a reserve wine in champagne. Going back to that, the style, the trace structure of that is the foundation of the entire champagne industry, which is non-vintage champagne. They have to set aside 20% and keep that as a reserve. So next year they can blend it into non-vintage. Year after they can blend non-vintage. And quite frankly, this reserve wine is what makes champagne one of the most complex kind of wines out there. Sure, you can talk about soil, we can talk about climate and all of that, but also the existence of these reserve wines that dates back hundreds of years, or decades at least. There are not many places in the world that have kept that much reserve wine back, and some of that gets added back into the current vintage. And that's what kind of makes it really complex and cool. What makes it special. So, but in reality, this aging requirement is actually much longer. So regular non-vintage, we're talking about 2 to 3 years, usually what they get. And then the actual vintage ones, they will be aged for 4 to 10 years. So we're talking about quite a bit of aging that happens in champagne. All right. So any questions about anything like this I went over? I just gave a lot of information about just champagne, trade structure, geography, soil type, and all of that before we kind of move into who makes this one. Isn't there a level above extra brut? So some producer, it's not a legal designation. So extra brut, and then there's a zero brut. There's a brut nature. All those things are essentially all interchangeable. But so some producer, just to distinguish themselves, they have extra brut, and then they have brut nature. Brut nature meaning absolutely no dosage, and extra brut meaning somewhere between no dosage and that brut level. So again, it's not a legal designation. They just do it just so they can distinguish their own wines. But legally speaking, the extra brut is essentially anything with less than brut. No dosage is basically what that is. Any other questions? What percentage of champagne is consumed domestically versus exported? I do not know. I'm willing to bet there's more exported than there's staying within France. But I'm not sure, to tell you the truth. That's just a bet. That's just a speculation. I thought we were talking about Miller Lite. Haha, Julia. Okay, great. Well played. All right, who makes this wine? This is Maison Duval-Leroy. Oh, forgot to show you this. Remember we talked about whittling? Somebody goes on there, turns it up, turns it up. This is basically what it looks like. This kind of A-frame structure. This is actually Duval-Leroy's cellar. So imagine somebody coming down here and turning each one of these and then pointing it up a little bit more, turning each one of these, pointing in one of there. I mean, this is just small. Like some houses you go down there and cellars, essentially like a mile long, just lined up with these A-frame structures, the whittling racks. So yeah, you can imagine how labor intensive this thing is. Anyways, here we go. Oh my God, this picture is fucking insane. Is there anything else that is more French and more champagne than this fucking picture? Like, it's fucking insane. But this is straight from the website of Duval-Leroy. Old school champagne house. This is dating back to 1859. So they have been in business for a long time. They've been making champagne for a very long time. Marriage of two families. Duval was the grower side of the family, and then Leroy was the merchant side of the family. And they got married and then decided this as champagne house back in 1859. Like I mentioned, they're quite sizable. They're big. Usually the producers I feature here, we're talking about 10 hectares, 20 hectares would be big for the producer that I feature usually here. But this one, they have a land holding of 200 hectares, spanning the entire Champagne region, but predominantly at their own home region of Côte Blanc. By the way, their name here is Louis, is the last one to join the family business. This is Carol Duval-Leroy. She's the matriarch of the family, sixth generation of the family that is heading up the winery. She is also the first and only woman to ever be appointed as the president of the Association of Champagne Growers. So we're talking about historic woman in the region. And then these are her three sons, Louis, Julian, and Charles. In terms of what they exactly do within the family business, I couldn't really get that information. Something tells me that they're not out there farming the land nor making the wine. But that's just, again, my speculation. They may just clean up very nicely. But yeah. So these four, this family business, her husband died unexpectedly, and then she kind of took over, and her sons joined the family business, and then these four are what's driving the family, continuing the family tradition now. So part of the reason why I chose Duval-Leroy is, or at least what made me feel better about choosing them, even though it's not something that I would usually go for, is I didn't know this, but Duval-Leroy is apparently the first certified organic producer in all of Champagne. They were the first one to produce certified organic group champagne in all of Champagne, which is I found fascinating that I never thought it would be Duval-Leroy. They have a lot. I mean, again, this could be all greenwashing, right? They have the money for it, but at least from what I see, and I wish more big houses would do this. And as I mentioned earlier, because that kind of climate reasons, a lot of rain comes in from the Atlantic Ocean. They have a really hard time controlling mildew and fungal diseases here. So organic farming is not a thing. It's not a huge common popular thing here in Champagne. A lot of places are sprayed. But the fact that somebody as big as Duval-Leroy is paying that much attention and investing that much money into actual organic farming and sustainable farming is what actually gave me some, justification, or at least made me feel good about featuring them. As well as also first woman president of Champagne Association, very much of an old white boys club that is Champagne, which is cool. They currently hold a level 3 HVE, the Haute Valeur Environnementale certification, the highest level of sustainability awarded by a French Ministry of Agriculture. HVE is basically like an organic certification, but they have some other emphasis on biodiversity, as well as they have a big emphasis on water management, both in terms of waste management as well as water sourcing. So we're talking about some additional layers of sustainability that are added in here. And I also know that this wine gets filtered with membrane that's made from pea proteins. Yeah, it was something wild. I was like, I've never even heard of that, but apparently it's what they do. So yeah, again, could be a bunch of greenwashing, but at least knowing that if I'm going to choose to drink a big house champagne, I like to choose one by something that actually has some sustainability after behind it. So we'll go with that. So what is this wine? This is a 90% Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier with a 10% Chardonnay. It's a blend from multiple subregions. So the Côte de Sézanne, the Marne Valley, Aube, they source grapes from all those different places. So as I explained earlier, this is clearly, obviously, a Blanc de Noir because 90% of it is black grapes and 10% of it is Chardonnay. 40% of what's in here is their reserve wine. So imagine that. The 20% of each vintage has to be held back. And then the 40% of what is inside this bottle comes from all those wines that are held back over the years. And that's part of what kind of gives it the complexity that you normally wouldn't find in things like Cava, because you're using old wines as a base wine. No fining. They do filter using the pea protein filter that are membrane that I was telling you about. No fining on this wine. This has spent 30 to 36 months on the lees. This varies depending on the vintage each year, but yeah, in general, their Brut Reserve, they age it for 30 to 36 months. So again, by law, they only have to age this for 15 months before they sell it, but they decide to age it for 30 to 36 months. So we're talking about at least twice as much and longer than the minimum requirement. Just to give you an idea of why champagne tends to be more expensive than other wines. Full malolactic fermentation here, and then dosage on this thing, and just to help you kind of calibrate your senses. There are about 8 grams per liter of dosage that's added here. So yeah, you can kind of think about what that means, and next time you get a wine that's sweeter than this, you can kind of see where that dosage level is, or less sweet than this, you can drier than this, and you can kind of figure out what that dosage level is. I could not find the disgorgement date on the label to save my life. I don't know if any of you were able to find it. If you do, let me know, but I couldn't see it anywhere. So I don't know the disgorgement date on this thing. Yeah, and that's what we have here. By the way, that word reserve gets thrown around quite a bit, not only in Champagne, but in all of wine industry. But that reserve means absolutely nothing. There's no legal designation. There's no technical designation or definition for reserve. What that means is just whatever reserve means to Duval-Leroy is what that means. So I know it makes it sound fancy and it's something cool and different, but reserve does not mean jack shit, just so you know. All right. Or at least there's no uniform definition of what reserve means. Each producer may have their own definition of what reserve means for that. So there you go. Any questions before we taste the wine? What characteristics make good champagne? So that there's multiple factors that go in here. The marginal climate, so it's getting cold, which means there's not a whole lot of ripeness to the grapes. It's a lot of acid, which is a good thing for wine. And then the soil, the chalky mineral limestone minerality. So there's a minerality, texture, as well, that kind of really precise acid precision that usually comes from limestone, really taught a lot of tension in the wine. And then because of that, because there's not a whole lot of this kind of a fruit richness in the wine, it takes on these autolytic flavors really well. Autolytic meaning, you know, when it's aged on the lees, all that brioche, pizza dough, you know, toast, all the things we talk about in method champagne or traditional method wines, champagne really gets that. So what is a really good champagne? We're talking about really good acid structure, really taut tension in the wine, really strong acid backbone, and then all that autolytic savory tone, and then all the complex flavors that just come from the years of that, the reserve wines being added to the wine. So that's kind of what I would expect. And then if you age champagne, and champagne, by the way, ages beautifully. As it ages, there's going to be a little more oxidation that comes into the wine. So we're talking about a little bit more like nutty, cheese rind, cheesy kind of a thing that happens. So yeah, with an older aged champagne, you can expect that. And really good because it spends that extra time on the lees aging. The bubbles are really fine, and then the mousse is just super delicate. I came with the photo yet, right? The photo is insane. Before seeing the photo, else I don't think I like it as much. Yeah. They're probably super nice when some PR person said they just sit like that. All right, so this is all about the photos. Okay. 43% of champagne is exported. Oh, wow. Amazing. I mean, they do drink quite a bit of champagne. Champagne is not like how it is here in the States. They drink it all the time. Doesn't matter if it's in the morning. It's just everyday drinking is a champagne, which I love. But do you prefer champagne, cava, or prosecco? Hard question. If I'm not paying for any of it, I'll take champagne any day of the week. If I'm paying, then I'll take cava, like a Grand Reserva cava any day of the week. If I'm at brunch, or if I'm like working with a cocktail, then I'm working with the prosecco. Prosecco has its place. I'm not shitting on prosecco. Like if I'm sitting by a pool, or at a beach on a hot day, or like a brunch, like prosecco is fantastic. Quite like this bottle.
I have the reason why I asked that question. I have a friend who swears by Prosecco. She says it's better than any bubbles, better than champagne, better than cava. And she actually wants to do a side-by-side tasting of that. And she's all about Prosecco.
It depends on what her definition of better is. What does she mean by better?
Oh, she's all into it. I don't know. She's so weird.
Yeah. I mean, again, there's difference between what you think is objectively better wine, and then we can debate that. But if it's like a matter of personal preference, she likes Prosecco more than others, then, I mean, I don't know if you can really debate that. It's more of, you like what you like. I will do questionable things to drink good champagne. It is absolutely true, yes. All right. Let's taste this. Who wants to take the appearance? Come on. All right, Sherice.
Oh no, Sherice. No, Sherice can do it.
All right, Allison, you can take the nose then.
No, you were doing so good, Allison. Go ahead.
Wait, are you saying you'll do the nose, Sherice?
I never said that. I said you go ahead with the appearance. Go ahead.
Well, you can still call her, call on her after you're done with the appearance. All right, Allison, let's do the appearance.
All right. This wine is clear.
This wine is clear.
I'm going to call it medium intensity.
Okay.
I'm gonna call it gold.
Yeah, there's some gold flecks here for sure. And in general, unless you're talking about like barely 15 months aged champagne, you are going to see some gold fleck coming into the wine because it's aged for like 3 years. So the wines tend to get a little bit deeper in color. So yeah, medium gold, 100%. Any other observations?
There are bubbles.
Yeah, really fine, like pinprick bubbles. They're like persistent
Yes.
coming out. Right.
Yes.
Cool.
And
You get to pick.
Sherice,
All right, Sherice, you got to do the nose.
take it away.
Boy, you suck. Okay.
I love you, Sherice.
I know. So I on the nose, it smells clean to me.
Yep, this one is clean. This one is sound. Intensity.
I would say medium minus because it didn't jump out at the glass
Yeah.
like I would expected. Medium at most.
Start moving it towards your nose and tell me when you start smelling it. Is your nose off the glass?
So about this much from the glass, I
Yeah.
start smelling it.
Okay. Then I will call that medium plus.
Okay.
So essentially, medium is like when your nose kind of like touches the glass or like just off the rim. And then
Mhm.
medium plus is a few inches above, pronounces even further above. And then medium minus is like when your nose is in the glass and you're kind of like struggling to get it. Light is just like, what the fuck is this? Like, I don't smell anything, really kind of a deal. But like to me, like I smell it here, which is,
And that's about where I smell it.
yeah. So I'll call that around medium plus. So medium plus intense aromas of, what do you get?
I get the first thing I got was golden apples.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
And for champagne, for some reason, I always get like this confectioner kind of like cupcakey kind of smell.
Okay. It maybe
I got
that's maybe that yeast that you were talking about. I mean, there's fruit that you're smelling here as well, but you're saying
yeah,
like a baked cupcake kind of a thing?
yeah.
Yeah, like a baked like cake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm getting some peaches off of it.
Okay, you got some peach. Okay.
And it's got a perfumey kind of smell. So I'm guessing there's some florality on it.
There's a little bit of florality here, like, which is not something that you get a lot of with champagne. Again, really cool place. Like the wines that come from it. If you guys ever get a chance to taste a base champagne wine, the still wine before it goes to the secondary fermentation, I actually hope you don't ever have to taste it for enjoyment purposes. But for educational purposes, I hope you guys get to taste it because it is fucking gnarly. It is aggressive. It is so acidic, and there's just really not much there. Like, imagine tasting a glass of lemon juice times 10. Like, it is aggressive. But the fact that I agree, there's a touch of like a floral, like prettiness on this wine, which I really appreciate. So yeah, like yellow apple, maybe touch of that flower. Again, when in doubt with the white wine, always go with the lemon. But that's for exam's sake, obviously.
Yeah.
But you're saying you get a little bit of stone fruit, like a peachy kind of a thing?
Peachy, apricot-y
Okay.
kind of situation.
Anything else? What else you got?
No, I'm not getting anything else that's like
dominant. No red fruit, black fruit, obviously, tropical fruit.
No.
How about the nature of the fruit? What do you think about the fruit?
I would say that this is really tart and fresh.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't say this is like the end of the season. Like, it's not underripe. I don't get any like green underripe fruit, but I get like super fresh beginning of the season ripe fruit. Not the
It's like that. it's like that turn, you know, that fresh
Yeah.
turn of
Yeah,
the season.
exactly.
Is what I'm getting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Any herbaceous herbal, any green things, any herbal things?
Not really.
Me neither. Any spice, any minerality?
I'm getting a little minerality on the glass, but
For sure.
no spice.
Yeah,
But there
no
is a
spice
little
either.
minerality.
Yeah, I don't get spice here either, but I definitely get some like whetstone minerality here for sure.
Mhm.
Secondary? Or yeah.
Definitely getting on the bit like the bready, toasty
Yeah.
notes.
Yeah.
That,
I mean, I think what you're calling out earlier, like the cupcake, like pastry, brioche, that kind of stuff, for
Mhm.
sure. There's
Yeah, that's
definitely
what I'm
autolytic.
getting. Mhm.
Yeah, there's definitely autolytic on this. Any MLF?
Maybe some vanilla,
Okay.
but that's
But
about
this one,
it.
yeah. Do you get any like cream, butter, anything like that?
I
I
always get a little buttery, like a little creaminess
okay.
whenever I drink champagne. And I don't
Yeah.
know if it's the bubbles or what, but yeah, I
It's
always get like a
this
buttery
one
note.
has gone through full mellow, so there's some roundness to this thing. I suck at calling this out on the nose. I usually only get MLF on the palate, but some people are much sharper with MLF on the nose than I am. But a lot of these kind of a rich, kind of a opulent style of champagne, you will find some of these kind of like a cream butter thing. It's not uncommon because they go through a full mellow. Champagne kind of divides two different styles. There's this kind of opulent, rich style, which is kind of like this. It has, but touch of sugar, touch of dosage. It puts it through a full mallow, and then there's the opposite end, which is like rip your fucking gum out, like laser focused, sharp, precise, acid driven champagne. No mallow. If there's maybe a little partial mallow, and then really all you get is really just kind of autolytic. You won't get much of this kind of all the things you and I were talking about, the floral, fruit, and all of that. And honestly, it's not that one is better than the other. It's just really the difference in style and in your preference. And
Yeah.
but usually with this little rich style champagne with the opulence. By the way, this is much more classic traditional style of champagne. That kind of acid driven, really laser focused style is much modern style. People moving away from dosage and bringing brut nature, not adding anything and just keeping it really sharp and almost austere. That's much more modern, but this is much more classic style champagne. But yeah, depending on your preference. But yeah, for sure, like that kind of like toasty brioche thing with a little bit of like creamy um, nature with this style of champagne is very, very common. Any tertiary things here?
I'm not getting any personally.
Me neither. On the nose,
I
I don't
think
get a whole lot much here. Yeah. Yeah, on the nose is mostly it's basically these autolytic things and then the fruit that you called out, the yellow apple, touch of flower, citrus, all of that is basically what I get. Minerality, like the whetstone. Yeah. Cool. Good job. You get to pick the next person for the palette.
I'm gonna pick Dave T. I'm gonna pick him, not a robot, because I think that's really funny.
Okay. I don't know what that means either. But... Mr. Talbot.
It was a thing where I made a mistake about my profile name. So I called me on it. So I was trying to be funny. And apparently, thankfully, someone thought it was true. So
all right, let's start from the
acting a
top.
robot would say, very true, Charles.
Yeah.
At least AI, if nothing else, right?
Yeah.
I would say this is dry.
This is dry. This is that, but however, having said that, this is that kind of upper end of dry, right? It's got that like 8 grams a liter of dosage in there.
Definitely some sort of sugar in there.
Yeah, you can tell there's some sugar in there.
From an acidity perspective, I would say this is not as high as a lot of them that we've had. So medium to medium plus. It's not
That's
facing me,
fair,
that's
though.
for sure.
Yeah, you gotta move it around and just kind of sit in there with it. Like, I mean, it doesn't come right away because that
Yeah.
sugar, the dosage in there, that opulence that I was talking about. But there's acid in there. Like, it's still pulling. Like, my mouth is watering right now. I'm gonna call this like
Maybe you're just still hungover.
that's also a possibility.
I would normally say no tannins, but given that this is made from red wine, I know there's something in there. Maybe it is the acid that has a little grip. I don't know.
No, it's probably that bubbles that's kind of giving you some of that. But
Okay.
I mean, it was separated off the skins as soon as it came in the cellar. There's absolutely no skin contact whatsoever. It would just wouldn't have enough time to extract any tannins on here. So yeah,
There's a sourness to it that I would normally associate with the tannins. Maybe that's just acid.
Yeah, I mean the acid on this thing is screaming. Like if this was a zero brut, like if this was a brut nature, like this acidity, you call this like screaming high. Like it is up there. Yeah. Alcohol. Guess the percentage. What do you think it is?
I would say this is probably 11.5 or 12.
Yeah, which is very, very kind of down the middle for champagne. Like again, it's very cold. It's hard to ripen grapes, so that's I would guess like around there as well. Yeah, 12%. So right on medium, lower end of medium. It's kind of where we are. Higher end of medium minus lower end of medium. Body.
Medium to medium plus for me. Probably in the middle there.
I know that mousse kind of gets in the way with the champagne, but there's definitely some body here. Again, that dosage, the 8 grams per liter dosage helps with that body as well. Full mallow helps with that body as well. All that time is spent on the lees also helps with the body. So yeah, we're not talking about, and also made with a Pinot Noir, mostly Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier instead of Chardonnay. That helps as well. So yeah, there's some weight to it. I'm gonna call this medium as well, like high end of medium, lower end of medium plus, somewhere in there. I'd probably stick with medium, but yeah, if you call this medium plus, I think it's completely reasonable. As long as you're not calling this light, you're good. Mousse.
I would call this creamy. I don't think it's aggressive, but because I don't like aggressive, but yeah, I could be persuaded.
But not quite delicate. It's not delicate enough for you.
I mean, I think it's very pleasant. I don't know if that defines as delicate. Not good at this one.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely had a champagne that has a bubbles that are much more delicate. That's usually older ones that I've had to spend even more times with the bubbles inside. But I would still call this delicate. I mean, it does creamy. It does cream up quite a bit. Like it fills your mouth as you move it around. But to me, the actual nature of the bubbles, like if you just kind of keep it on your tongue and just like let it sit there, it's not like super prickly. It's just like a tiny little pricks. So to me,
we'll say creamy minus delicate plus.
There you go. Somewhere there. Delicately creamy. Flavor intensity?
That was pretty decent. I would say medium to between medium and medium plus for me.
Yeah, I would totally call it a medium plus as well. All the flavors that are there are not shot. It's there. There's some intensity to that. So let's talk about it. Do you agree with the things that Sherice called out?
I do. I mean, I think the nose and the palate may be a little different for me. There's a lot of green fruit on this for me.
Okay.
Super aptly to me. Maybe a little bit of like, I don't know, gooseberry is a tough one for me. Maybe a little on the peach apricot side or nectarine. I don't know, that's not too bad. Yeah, no, I mean, I wouldn't say like a ton of different. I mean, the complexity on the palate for me isn't like super undefined. I mean, it's pretty clear to me. I don't like, oh, what's that? But
yeah, like to me, I agree with that green fruit call here. I guess some green apple here too, but yellow apple for sure. The lemon for sure here.
Yep.
Not I'm not, honestly, I don't get a whole lot of stone fruit here. If anything, that kind of like a touch of florality that Sharice talked about. I guess some of that, but really in terms of fruit, for me, this is citrus and like a yellow green apple,
Yeah.
really tart, kind of like a fresh
If you
turn
merge
of the season.
lemon and an apple together.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Got it.
Any of these things, herbaceous, herbal,
I don't
spice?
actually get a ton
already?
of that. Not really. I mean, normally I would expect there to be something herbaceous about this, but I don't really get anything pungent or herbal, or quite frankly, anything from the stone side.
Yeah,
It's mostly
hear
fruit.
that. But here, this is where, and this is something I think, again, you have to taste a lot of wines that come from chalky or limestone soil. Like there's definitely limestone minerality that's different from others. And that's why limestone, people keep talking about limestone.
Yeah.
There's this tension about this thing. There's this like chalky tension here. To me, there's a chalky minerality running through the palate here. Like on the nose, I didn't get a whole lot of it, like maybe like a little wet stone, but just surely this wine has that chalky thing running all the way through.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's what I was mistaking for the tannin.
Yeah, maybe that. Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, now that you mention it, there is a mouthfeel to it that is chalk. So that makes
Yeah.
total sense to me. It
I
doesn't
always
taste like chalk, but it certainly has that mouthfeel.
Yeah, it's like if you ever, as a kid, like cleaned out like blackboard erasers, and then when it gets all dusty with the chalk dust, and if you ever like walked through that and inhaled it, and if you landed on your tongue sometime, you kind of know what that feels like. And to me, this has that running all the way through. So for sure. Secondary here?
There's definitely some yeast on this.
Yeah. Autolytic.
I don't know how to
Autolytic. Yeah. For
sure.
sure.
I don't get a ton of, I mean, there's no oak on this for me at all.
No.
Maybe kind of butter, and maybe it's a brioche, but it's hard to figure out.
Yeah.
Given the sort of citrusy nature of this, but
yeah,
definitely bready.
Yeah, definitely get the bready dough, the autolytic thing running all the way through here. In terms of MLF, again, I suck at calling out actual flavor of it, but to me, the acid here, I mentioned there's a lot of acid here. It's high, but it's not like this jaggedly, really sharp, like super precise acid here. It's like this rounder. So to me, that's the sign of MLF, not necessarily the flavor. But again, if you have the palate that's much sharper than mine in terms of MLF, then
I don't.
if you get some, cream, if you get some milk, that's all great. Anything in the tertiary territory?
I don't get a lot of tertiary here.
Okay, but I want you to sit with it. All of you take a sip, and I want you to sit with it, and I watch the length, and we're going to talk about length in a second. So watch for length, how long the flavors last, and then I want you to watch how the flavors change at the end, towards the end of that length. See if you get anything.
Again, it's quite tart, right? And I don't know how that fits into the tertiary.
Yeah, there's definitely some oxidation here. There's an oxidized stale that's coming in here.
Okay.
It comes like just halfway past the halfway point. By the way, my length is still like I'm still tasting it.
Oh no, it's incredibly long.
Yeah, but towards the second half of it, this kind of like almondy, nutty kind of a thing starts to kick in, and it kind of lingers. And again, this has been aged for at least 30 months, somewhere between 30 to 36 months.
Yeah.
So we're talking about quite a bit of time this has spent on the lees already. So you can kind of see that some of that oxidative effect is trying to take place here. So yeah, there's not a ton of it, but you know, obviously longer this ages, more of this will pop up. But right now, there's a little bit of oxidative thing that's coming in right now. And all of that could be not just in the 30 months, but just the reserve wines. I mean, those 40%, that's pretty high. Like 40% of this wine being reserve wines, that's not current vintage. That those are all the wines that have been, you know, who knows what vintage it came from. They don't actually disclose that. But all those wines that have been aging probably most likely in a neutral barrel somewhere. They're all getting oxidized over time. Slowly, microoxygenation is happening. So all that adding up on top of that, that gets aged further 3 years in the bottle. So it's pretty reasonable to start to see some of this deliberate oxidation start to come into play here.
I don't do the marzipan thing because I really don't like marzipan, but
Ah,
yeah, there you go.
got it.
You highlight it. That's the only
And then
way.
the finish, you call this long as well?
I would say it's long, yeah.
Okay.
For
Agreed.
champagne, for me, it is long.
Yeah, agreed. This is definitely long. Like the length goes on forever. All right, let's take it on for us. How good is this? And would you drink it? Would you age it?
Well, I think it's actually quite lovely right now. I'm sure it will improve with age. I think everything that we've evaluated makes this very good, to be honest with you.
Yeah, exactly. Balanced, like, medium plus intensity, medium plus complexity. Right? We had a bunch of primary with secondary layer of tertiary coming in, medium plus if there were maybe more primary things still going on.
Yep.
Or more strong, like a tertiary things kick in, maybe this would be a pronounced or high complexity. But right now, I think medium plus is completely reasonable. And then we called it long. So when you take a average of all of that, we're landing somewhere between medium plus and high.
And
somewhere
for
very
all
good
of you who know me well enough, I don't like bubbly. So this is
Yeah.
pretty good. So
Excellent. Would you age it?
there.
Would you age it?
Yes. Yeah, of course.
How
I
about?
mean, with that acid, absolutely. I don't know
Yeah,
how
exactly.
much it's going to improve. I mean, this is not their top of the line, right? But it would be it would be very interesting in 5 years, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
The challenge is like, when you have a non-vintage, do you just label it and say what year you bought it? I mean, what do you do with wines that are non-vintage?
Yeah, I guess that's usually with the champagne. That's what you do.
Get a
You
chunk-
basically
chunk
know
of
when
that.
you got it. Yeah. You have an idea of when you got it. Yeah, exactly. You can put it on the label. You
It
can put it on the
wasn't
bottle.
bottled in 1859, which it says in the middle of it.
That's just where it started. But yeah, non-vintage. Unfortunately, on the label, unless you look at the disgorgement date, I still haven't been able to find it on.
No, I
here.
think I think the spot where they're supposed to put that is blank. And so maybe that's
in the back. That area.
Maybe you bought this out of the back of a truck or something.
Yeah, maybe. But yeah, I say because of that acid backbone, it has still the intensity and the complexity. We still have a lot of that primary fruit that we call that. A lot of that is going to switch over to tertiary, adding more to the oxidative flavor, a lot of non-fruit things that are going to come out of this thing, adding even more complexity. Right? We talked about complexity is the one that was kind of at medium plus bordering on the high. So it will add another layer of complexity, taking this into more outstanding to that very good. So I would say this wine has an excellent aging potential. I would say, yeah, I think 5 to 8 years is easy, if not longer. But yeah. But also having said that, I think it's drinking beautifully right now. I'll drink this now, but definitely suitable for aging for another 5 to 8 years easily is my call on this one.
Awesome.
Good job. Any questions?
I have a question, but it's not related to this wine.
Okay.
Do you want to stay on topic?
No, not at all.
Okay. I wanted to know what is in terms of retail value, what is the cheapest wine that you would call excellent that you've come across?
Like outstanding or very good, or what are we talking?
Outstanding. Yeah. The one we always say like very good. We always say very good for like a lot of the wines, but like the top rating.
Outstanding. Where have I gone? Like as a region as a whole? Are you asking me for one particular?
Oh, no, just like a wine.
Or what are we
like?
talking
What's
about?
the cheapest wine? Or like, and I know you probably don't remember off the top of your head, but like,
Yeah,
because so many of the wines we try are good and very good, and obviously we have to stay within a range because the wine club is whatever dollars a month.
Yeah.
But like, and all of this matters about like marketing matters and blah blah blah. But I'm just like wondering like, what's the most affordable bottle you've had that you would characterize as outstanding? How cheap, how expensive was it in just sort of ballpark terms?
Next month, there's Cremant de Limoux that's coming in that I would argue that it's a borderline outstanding. It,
Ooh, and are
and
you
then-
just saying that because I'm skipping next month?
Yes. Yes,
okay, sure. And then that
Asshole.
comes in
Asshole.
a
I'll
incredible
leave you
price.
half of mine, Allison.
Yeah,
Thank
No
you.
that's what you get for skipping it.
This was I walked into this one.
problem.
There's some Beaujolais, Cru Beaujolais that I've considered calling outstanding, and those are
Mhm.
all within reasonable range. I've had some
You're right.
Sicilian wines that were in the teens wholesale price that I would have called outstanding.
What?
Yeah,
That's madness.
so yeah, depends. One thing I will say is that if there's anything that I've learned in 15 plus years in wine is that there's absolutely no correlation between price and quality.
None at all.
None of it. It's all demand.
Trader Joe's.
Yeah, it's all demand and what you can get away with.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, let me phrase the question a different way because I think this is fun. What is the wine you wish you'd bought like 5 cases of that you've had? Knew that
Yes.
wasn't going to be like bank breaking, but like
Yes.
I love this wine so much that I'm going to buy every bottle of it that I can, even though, you know, I mean, I don't know what the price point for that is, but like this is the wine that changed my life. You know, I mean, not your gateway wine, not your
Yeah. I
like,
mean,
this wine that you really wish you'd bought all of.
this always goes back to me, because again, like you gotta remember, even though I worked in wine for a long time, the majority of wines that I've worked with are not these like top of the end premium wines. Like I didn't work in crazy auction houses. I didn't work in these,
You're working in the ones that are sold by $14 a glass, right?
right.
I get it.
Yeah. And then the wines that were
bringing into Marty's house.
right. Having said that, like a lot of like old Marcel Lapierre, like Cote de Pie, like 10 years ago, I wish I would have loaded up. Some Jura wines, I wish I would have loaded up on there about 10 years ago. Like I would have never thought Jura was going to get explode that much. But yeah, it's wild.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Would vote for a wine club month where our subscription like triples, but you choose wines that at a higher price point and therefore are closer to the outstanding level. I mean, you said there's no correlation, but if you had more freedom to choose wines that weren't restricted by price for 1 month out of the 12 months, you know, we're all in this for the long term, right? Would people be interested in that for
I mean, there's some months that I've done, like I'll give you an example, like at the beginning of this year, we did Burgundy and Oregon. Those 2 months were not. And then we ended last year with Piedmont, right? Like the wines that came out of that were pretty damn good, but also they were quite expensive, but they were not also, some of them were, I wouldn't say any more outstanding than any other wines that we've served. But as overall box, like I knew, and this is kind of what I take an average of entire year and I kind of distribute out here and there, but like I knew when I was losing money on those 2 months, but you know, I can make that up in somewhere else. And it's part of the reason I did Mary Taylor month, right? Like I blended out. But, you know, is Mary Taylor's wine?
Well, Mary Taylor was like fan favorites, right?
Right.
I mean,
So
not very expensive, but very, very high quality.
yeah, there were outliers there, right? Like that Barolo that we had in the Piedmont month. Objectively speaking, that was probably one of the best wines that we had this year. But that also came in at like $35 wholesale, you know? So it all kind of depends. You want to know if I'm pro or anti-Kir Royale? I am very, very, very pro Kir Royale. I'm a big Kir Royale champagne cocktail fan.
I didn't want you to be offended if I brought out the, the Chambord right now. So
No, do it.
Ooh, and I feel like we had that conversation at some point because
I
I'm
think
a
we're-
Kir Royale fan. I feel like we
Chambord.
talked about this and you validated my love of Kir Royales.
Yeah.
And so
Kir
I've
Royale-
I filed it away. I'm like, this is an okay thing to like.
Yeah. A lot of grapefruit for me, Parmesan cheese rind, yep, the stop oxidation, as well as the autolytic. White Lambrusco we call outstanding, yep. Not priced like champagne. DOUCHEBAGS, yeah, we're gonna do another DOUCHEBAGS, that's all coming. Cool, cool. All right, here we go. How much do you
Okay,
think
I
this
have a
wine is?
question.
What's up?
I have a quick question. Because I suck at acid calls when it comes to bubbles.
Mhm.
So do you think the bubbles throw off the acid calls at all?
I don't think it's the bubbles. I think it's the dosage. I think it's the level of sugar in the sparkling that's throwing off your acid call. Like I mentioned, this wine with no dosage added, you will no doubt, undoubtedly get acid on this thing. In fact, you'll be like, this shit is so high in acid. But because there's 8 grams per liter of sugar that's in here, your perception of it, the acid doesn't seem so high because there's sugar that balances it. Sugar and acid kind of cancel each other out, they balance each other. It'd be the same thing if the other way. If you took like just a cup of sugar water and drank it, you'd be like, oh, this is so fucking sweet, right? Like a syrup. But as soon as you squeeze lemon into it, it will no longer feel as sweet because it's balanced. It becomes lemonade. It becomes delicious. All right. So, Duval-Leroy, big house, their Brut Reserve. It's not their entry level, but it's not their highest level either. What do you think this would go for on a retail shelf? How much would you be happy paying for this on a retail shelf? It is champagne, the most well-branded wine in the world, in history of wine. You pay 40 to 45. $35, $40, $41, $60, $60, $55, $50, $40, $50, $50, $30. Cost 40, you pay 60.
That is very different than our normal.
Yeah. This is this is champagne, so I don't know. All right, so just to give you an idea of how much this would go for on a retail shelf, this would be Hazel, right on the dot, $60 on a retail shelf. So if you were to go to a store, this would be $60. However, I said this, the part of the reason I chose this was because there was an incredible sale that's running on this. And then I locked up some of it for us for a case club. So for us, our case club price on this thing would be $37.50. So that's why I featured this, because I wanted you guys to know.
I'm into it, Un. I'm into it.
Yeah.
I will buy some of the bottles.
It's really good, but I think champagne has this reputation that it has to be really expensive to be high quality.
Yeah, they're all in terms of as a category as a whole, it is more expensive than other sparkling wine. But yeah, oftentimes it's the reason why it costs more is because it's a longer aging. Sure, you can talk about particular site like Grand Cru site, Premier Cru site, and all the things that we're talking about, but it's really the aging is what makes its price go up. Because if they age it, arguably, if they age it on average, age their wines longer than any other sparkling wines that are out there. But also it's very well branded. It just, people are willing to pay premium because, it's seen as a luxury thing. It's a brand. Champagne is a brand, basically. But yeah.
Like, I would never make like a mimosa with something like this.
Yeah, why would you? It's got some sugar in it already. So why would you need to? How would I do this? Compare this to Egly-Ouriet. All right, so Egly-Ouriet is a grower champagne that Charles is talking about. I would expect Egly-Ouriet, and actually in general, Egly-Ouriet would have much less dosage level than this. So it'd be much more precise. And in general, Egly-Ouriet is a much more precise that style. Earlier we talked about precision versus opulence, kind of a difference in style. Egly-Ouriet tends to be a lot more on that kind of a precision acid-driven style versus this. And Egly-Ouriet also does not have as long of a reserve wine saved as someone like Duval-Leroy does. So even stylistically, it just wouldn't be as, I don't expect to be as complex in terms of actual like the reserve old wine flavor that would be added. However, where Egly-Ouriet is exciting to me is that there's actually way more vintage variation. Again, it's all non-vintage. There's not going to be huge fluctuation, but you get to kind of see what happened to his area and his plot as opposed to Duval-Leroy. Honestly, this is going to taste exactly the same year after year because they have that huge thing of reserve wine to play with. And they have master blenders on staff. Their whole job is year after year to come up with the exact same flavor profile, even though you're working with completely different raw ingredients. That's their whole job. And Egly-Ouriet doesn't necessarily do that. Like he's more of like, sure, I mix him some reserve wine, and I'm sure he tastes his wines and blends it to have some sort of consistency. But he's less of that. Like it's got to be exactly the same every year. Because it's not like his is not less of a brand. It's not less of a house style. I don't know if that makes sense. But any other questions? What would you use for mimosa? Prosecco, for sure. Prosecco, fruit and sugar. Yep. Or cheap Cava, very young Cava. That's another thing that I'll use. Not like a Reserva or Grand Reserva Cava, but like a young entry-level Cava. Yeah, that would also be a good candidate for mimosa, but I'll go with the Prosecco personally. Personally, I would order the mimosa and hold the orange juice. That's what I would do. Any other questions? Did everybody like this wine, by the way? Did anybody not like this one, just out of curiosity? Perfect. Sherice, we talked about this at the beginning of the month. What is your opinion on sparkling wine now that you've got through a month of sparkling wine?
I still have a hard time evaluating it, but I have a greater appreciation for it than I did previously. Because I don't drink a lot of sparkling, so I do have a greater appreciation for it now than I previously did.
Perfect.
But I still prefer steel. I still
Right.
prefer steel because I can evaluate it better.
That's okay. That's okay. We'll get you there.
Come on.
I'm glad as soon as I moved you at least one step closer to at least giving it a chance. That's all I asked. That's great. Any other questions?
This wine is really rich and kind of round and delicious. I like it.
Mm-hmm. It's a very different style than probably the champagne that like you and I usually drink or like tend to go for. But yeah, it's a very different style. Again, I like both of them. They're just very different.
It's not like a linear wine. It's just, I mean, I think opulent is the right word.
Yeah.
It's really pleasant.
Yeah.
It's very delicate on the like on the front part of the palate, and then it kind of, but it does have the acidity. It's a well balanced wine. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
might not
Yeah.
be your stylistic preference, but like this is the solid ass champagne. 37.50. Damn.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
When I drink
20
champagne,
years ago, you couldn't find a bottle of like, you know, yellow label above Clicquot for $41. 37.50 for
Yeah.
this, which is better than that was. I mean, that's a fantastic price.
Yeah, that's honestly that's a steal. Like you guys should load up, and that's part of the reason why I did it. It's like you guys should load up. You guys
It should
should
be
taste
$50 on sale. Like
Yeah.
at the lowest price should be $50.
Exactly,
Yeah, it's great.
100%.
there are certain champagnes that I drink because I know the labels. This is not. I have my certain brands that I drink in terms of champagne, but this one is really good. I really enjoyed it. So
Good. Any which one's your favorite out of the 4 bottles this month? Just out of curiosity.
still the Cava is still my
Cava.
favorite.
Okay. Okay. Anyone else?
This one in the Cava.
Yeah.
I think I probably like this one a tiny bit more. But like the price of the Cava is so excellent that makes me like it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, 100%.
Like I think I like this one at whatever price, the same as I like the Cava. But if they were both priced the same, I would pick this one, of course, you know? But I like
Yeah.
both very much.
That Cava is an incredible value as well. Like
Mhm.
this, both last week Cava and this one, they're like stupid value. Like it's a steal for what you're getting. Also, if you remember, last month Cava was Brut 0, which means there's no dosage added. This one is 8 grams. So that's one way to kind of figure it out.
Mhm.
Kind of help you to calibrate your senses, what dosage feels like to you, what 8 grams of sugar feels like to you.
I was gonna say that Cava to me was too dry
Yeah.
Mm.
because
Yeah.
it felt like too acidic. Like it didn't have that balance of.
Yeah.
For me, it didn't have the balance of the sugar versus the acid.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's a
I
completely
like-
fair assessment. Yeah.
And I like the complexity on the Cava from last week. I felt like that was the most complex of the box that
Ah.
most complex one that we had.
Interesting. Okay.
Did we say that we could age the Cava? I always stop taking notes by the time we say that, and then I buy the wine and then I can't remember what we said. What did we say that like the Cava should be aged or not?
Like, would that Cava from last week age longer? Will it age longer?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm still not writing it down, so I'll forget, but I'll email you later when I forget.
Okay. Yeah.
Allison, just call me and I'll tell you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
See, now you guys know why I always advocate for Grand Reserva Cava or Cava is a great replacement for champagne. But given what it is, they're just kind of nothing quite like champagne. Like nothing quite hits like champagne. It's all that complexity, it's all that minerality, it's the precision, it's the opulence. You know, there's something about it that is just not quite replicated anywhere else in the world. So yeah, but you make your decision whether it's worth the cost, it's worth the squeeze. But there you go. I feel fancy with champagne. It's that branding at in play. This is why it's the most well-branded wine ever.
So I will say this, I quite like the Kai de Zago, which is the
Mhm.
Car Fondo.
Yeah, that Car Fondo was amazing.
And I felt like that actually was a little closer to the champagne.
Mm,
Delicate, it was well balanced, had a little bit of sweetness to it.
yep.
We actually took my dad to Masseria the next week because
Yeah.
I showed him a big gift. And they served, I can't remember exactly what it was, but some kind of Italian fancy something or other. And I was like, this tastes exactly, I'm sure it was like $400 a bottle. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
It's Masseria. And it tasted exactly like the Kai de Zago.
All right.
was like, well, this is quite good, but you know, I just had
Yeah.
$3 bottle of this last week.
It's like I can, but I can taste this at home. Yeah, that stuff is good. I mean, all the wines, except for, yeah, I mean, all the wines. I say Jacques Bull is probably the only one that is little. The value proposition wise is probably the lowest, but everything else I think is incredible value, incredible steal for what it punches way above its price for sure. This is pretty much how I feel about Masseria. I've never been to Masseria actually, but that's pretty much what I've heard from a lot of people. They're like, it's good, but the value proposition is way off.
Never spent as much money in DC as that place.
Yeah.
It's
No,
fun.
it's an experience. I mean,
Yeah.
We took my dad, and the first, you know, he's like, "Oh, so what do we order?" I'm like, "No. They just bring you food. Like you don't order anything. They
Yeah.
just bring you food." He's like, "What? I don't understand." And it's just the service level is amazing.
Yeah. Okay.
So you think it's worth it, David?
It's if you just want to have one of those like fine dining experiences where you just don't need to worry about anything, and they just bring up.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. Is the food better than other food in DC? You know,
Mhm.
sure. You're going to find some very interesting things you might not find anywhere else.
There's a new French place opening up across the street, so we'll see what the comparison
That's
is.
true.
like.
Yeah.
And see, I'm not much for fine dining. Like fine dining for me is like curly fries.
I mean, curly fries are fucking delicious. So
Yeah.
I'm
This
I'm
is
not
what I'm
with you on
saying.
that.
This is what I'm
We-
saying, but they're so
At
fancy.
Masseria, the curly fries are $70. I would like to know.
I'm
Yeah, but you know,
say I
shaving a
started
fresh
my
truffle
dinner
on them.
today
So
with buffalo blue cheese tater tots. Not
What?
this-
Where?
That was my. I'm out in Lewis, Delaware, and there's a brewery, and I'm like very dark in this hotel room. But yeah, happy hour special buffalo drenched blue cheese tater tots was not a
All
bad.
I want, that's all I want in my
Yeah.
life.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's
I've
so
never had blue cheese before.
What? Oh.
Oh.
What? Sharice?
never had blue
Right,
cheese.
I am not fancy. Like fancy
Yeah.
to me.
Blue cheese is not fancy.
Sharice, you can get blue cheese at Outback Steakhouse,
Blue
Sharice.
cheese is moldy.
In
Right.
fact, you should. You should go get their salad. They got a salad with like candied pecans and blue cheese.
Standard
Cheese
wings
should
with
not-
blue cheese
Cheese
sauce.
should not. I think my blockage. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I am not a fancy eater. Cheese should not be blue.
I
It's
get
not
that.
blue.
Wow.
it's not
It's
really.
not.
Fair
Cheese
point,
should
and yet
not
when you
be
try
not
it, you'll
blue.
realize how good it
The
is.
cheese is not blue.
No, it's like a white crumbly cheese, but it's like a stinky cheese, so it has some mold in
Well,
it.
why do they call it blue cheese?
Well, it has
It's
some
Well,
blue
it's
bits.
blue
It has
mold
blue
lines in
bits.
it.
Let's be
Special
real. There are
mold.
some blue bits.
Intentional
blue.
mold.
Yeah, there's some
Intentional mold.
veins. Like there's some.
But it's not like blue raspberry colored cheese.
No.
Yeah, but I mean,
As
I'm a
someone
little
who
bit with
thinks-
Sharice. I feel like blue cheeses can be a little aggressive. Like
It is
it's
Aggressive.
yeah.
I think you
like I
ease
feel like
yourself
it's like then it like
correctly.
it's the only thing you taste in the whole thing. Like
Yeah.
it's a little. It can be a
Well,
little.
I don't think Sharice has to like it, but I do think Sharice should taste it.
I think the
I
ease in
am not.
cheese dip.
We
Like
talked
the
about
blue
this a
cheese
couple weeks
dressing
ago.
with wings is the ease in.
Mhm.
See, I'm
Yeah,
see
a
that-
good Frank's hot sauce.
that with wings makes no sense to me. Blue cheese and wings makes no sense to me.
I mean, does
I
blue
am-
cheese and ranch make any sense to you? Because that doesn't make any
Wings.
goddamn sense either.
Ranch is blue
That
cheese.
blue cheese and wings makes no sense to me.
I understand that, but does ranch and wings
Wing-
make any sense to you?
No,
Right.
that makes no sense to me.
Well, no,
Do you
I mean-
no, it makes sense. You've got a hot sauce, and so you want to put something creamy on it, so that the hot is less hot and it makes it richer. That makes perfect sense. But then the blue cheese or the ranch gives you a little saltiness.
I am from Arkansas. We don't do that here.
Wait, do you not eat wings either, Sharice?
I do eat wings, but just
Then you-
wings with hot sauce. If you want to make it flavored, put more hot sauce on it.
Okay,
And then
but you don't dip it in
Yeah.
anything.
on top.
No,
Oh, all right.
All right.
Well,
no,
It sounds like we have
Right.
a project, ladies and gentlemen.
yeah.
no. You have a huge project. 'Cause
Sharice is gonna get like 10 pounds of blue cheese sent to our house by this group.
I had sushi for the first time last year, and I'm still traumatized.
Well, are you still in Arkansas? Because that could cause that.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I'm still in Arkansas. Apparently,
Try
I'm
traveling
probably-
to a coast and then try sushi.
Yeah, I don't understand.
Although I will
Sushi.
say some of the best sushi I've had in my life is in Salt Lake City.
Really,
As we talked about last week or a couple weeks ago,
it was a couple
there's
of weeks
clearly some
ago.
psychological block here. And
Yeah,
at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you try it or not. If you don't want to try it, if you think you're not going to like it, it's like drugs. It's like settings and set matter. If you're going
I've
into it
tried
and you think
sushi,
you're not
though,
going to like it
before.
and you think it's weird, then you're not going to like it.
I
I
love where
had
this is
sushi
going.
before, and I had it with Riesling because they were doing a wine sushi pairing. They even paid for my meal, and I don't understand. Yeah,
Hey, you don't have to like it either. Just try it.
Yeah,
If you don't
I
like it, don't eat it. That's great. That's
yeah,
fine.
I didn't like it, but they said it was Arkansas sushi, so that didn't count.
What is that, roadkill?
Arkansas sushi is different.
It was probably lake trout.
No.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. but
Green perch. Yeah, no, I mean,
They
what
said
was
it was
that?
sushi was supposed to be good, and it was not good.
Well, sushi
So
is a
Mark-
pretty
Mark
broad range
Bittman-
too, so. there
Mark
you go.
Bittman does say that you have to try something 20 times before you can decidedly say you don't like it. And with different preparations.
Agree to
Mark
disagree
Bittman
with
is a
that.
cookbook author. I don't know if you know, but anyway.
Children
I'm
say
only gonna
different.
try it. I'm only gonna try it once, maybe twice.
Sharice, I don't like sushi either, in case it helps.
Yeah, I don't. I just
I
don't,
don't think
understand
sushi's
it.
that uncommon for people not to like.
Yeah, that's fine.
But there are
But
so
20
many different
times
kinds
is
of
a bit much.
sushi.
I'm all for 3 or 4, but 20 is too much. By the end of
20
20,
is too much.
because isn't there like a thing where if you eat something 15 times, your brain adjusts to it?
I think like if you're a toddler.
So here's the point, right? My wife never liked wine because her parents always like